Okay, so now we've built the edit form. If we go back to our browser to take a look at what this looks like, it's when we click edit right here. And we've built this form dynamically now. Now the next thing that we do is save the changes to this form. So let's work through our script one more time after we submit the changes. So I'm going to go back to our editor, and in our products.php file, again, we run every action the same way, passing our options array to data administration page. So in our CRUD.php file, we'll scroll down to the bottom and look at this one more time. We set our path, establish our content, switch based on our action, which in this case is going to be edit item. Now we got that from the hidden input in our form, and we're assuming this time that we're passing validation and we're not going to display any errors on validation or rebuild the form. We're actually going to process the editing of this record. So the content is going to be what we return from data add edit form process, and we're passing it the post variables and also our options. So one thing to note here is that we're looking at a structure that's so similar to our previous CRUD examples, but we're having to pass this options array around just to make sure that we're displaying the right content and managing the right records for this particular page. In a few videos, what we're going to do is look at how to use a class for this same type of process. And when we use a class, we don't have to do this passing of options between the different functions anymore, which is pretty cool. Okay, so now let's take a look at our data add edit form process. I'm going to scroll up until I get there. So it's right here. We're passing it again the values, which was the post array, and then our list of options, which was established in our products.php file. So in this first line here, what we're doing is taking the ID, which we pass through the form with the key of ID, and we're reassociating it with the ID column or the unique identifier column for this table. So we're grabbing that column right here, which is in the options array. For products, that's going to be PID. So now we'll have values PID equals, and then this number, whatever it is, instead of values ID, which doesn't line up with any columns inside of our table. This way we can use this values array later on as a loop. And also we've centralized all of the information about this record into a single array. In this next step, we're going to validate our form. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. I'm going to run up to here where we have data add edit form validate. We pass it the options and the values. This should look, for the most part, familiar. You see we have the switch statement and we're switching based on the type of validation that we're doing here. And this is nested inside of a loop where we're going through each of our add edit columns in our options array. We're pulling out the column name and the column options. And one of those column options is the validate option. And so then we're going to loop through each one of these validate options and pull it out as the type variable, and we're going to switch based on that. So again, if we look at our products array here, we're going to loop through each one of these. So the first time we loop through, we have title, and the validate that we're going to run is required. The next time will be price, and we're going to loop through twice for required and numeric. So if we go back to crud.php, again, our first column here is title, and our only validate option is required. So we'll switch based on type. The type is required, and we do the check here. Again, our column name is title. We pulled it out up here. And the values is, again, the array of post variables from our form. And we trim this to remove any extra white space from either side of the string. We check to see if it's empty. If it is, we're going to give back this error. And then that finishes the loop for the title input. The next input is our price input, and we have two validation options. So this for each loop will actually run once and twice. The first time we do a check for required, and the next we do a numeric check. We do a trim again on the data, and then we check if it's numeric with the isNumeric function, and we add an error if it's not numeric. Now at the end of all this, at the bottom, we return the errors, and then we process that inside of our processing function. Now let's just quickly compare this with our old product page. I'm going to go back to our site folder, and I'm going to open up products-old.php, and I'm going to scroll down to the part where we get to the validation. Now you can see when we had our CRUD scripts specific to a particular type of data, what we could do here was set which elements were going to be required, and then we loop through each one of those and perform the validation on that. We set which items were alphanumeric, and then we loop through and perform validation on that. So if you compare this with our new CRUD validation function, in some ways it seems more complicated. We have a lot more nesting going on because we have to do 2 for each loops in order to get to the right type of data inside of our options array. But once we get to the type of data, then our code actually becomes a bit cleaner. We have a case, we have the validation, and we break. It's actually quite simple here. And so as we expand this validation, the code will actually be quite a bit cleaner than when we look at our old validation tools.